All right, I'm going to talk about. I did Florida LitCon because I really talk about this subject a lot, and it's not because of Florida LitCon that I'm talking about this subject, but it is relevant. This morning we got news that a couple of things is happening. One, Star Wars just said that, or Disney said that all of the books that were deemed legacy, right, legacy series or legacy books were now being considered for stories in future television shows and movies, or in other words, it's now being considered canon, okay? Because what they had said was that all of these books that were written, are all fan stories. They're all fan fiction. They're just consistent. It's a consistent universe of fan stuff. And then, slowly we saw things, characters being taken from these books, like Thrawn, who really gets the credit, or Timothy Zahn, for creating Thrawn, Admiral Thrawn, or Emperor Thrawn, heir to the Empire, on how he brought the Empire back after Return of the Jedi, and got the whole universe started all over again. So now they're saying that these books are now canon. And, I had already told people all the time that, Star Wars would have never come back after Empire, the Return of the Jedi, if it hadn't been for the books. And the books are hot. So, I love Clone Wars and the animated series. All of that would not have been around if it wasn't for the books. And this kind of is my subject today, is that, I'm talking about books, and I'm talking about, maintaining or building a brand, or just exploring a brand. I don't know what it is about books that allow for sub stories and experimental stories and other things to be explored, but books certainly allow for that. Even in a way, comic books haven't really been used, or board games. Board games are totally just canon. I mean, a fan. You got the gamekeeper. He may come up with a good story, but he may not even remember it. He may not write it down. Some of these stories that you see shared on websites for board games, they, rarely get written up as stories and books, and they rarely ever make it to another medium. Comic books, for superheroes, yeah. Superheroes, yes. You want to be like Shuri, Shuri. We have her comic book now, and exploring her whole story that you don't see in a Black Panther movie. Now, will any of that become canon? Is it canon now? We don't know. That's the question about, Marvel and DC. They remaking so many of the characters. You don't know what storyline is actually canon or which one was just in comic books. They changed the costumes, so even the costumes are not canon. That's crazy. But going back to Star Wars, I think it's really cool. One of my favorite Star Wars stories is The Force Unleashed. Now that's taken from the video game, and I like the video game. My son said we need to play it again, so I'm gonna, want to play it again. But the video game is hot, and the story is what I really like. So they got The Force Unleashed 1 and The Force Unleashed 2, and when they came out with The Force Unleashed, or The Force Awakened, for some reason it made me think of The Force Unleashed, and I was like, man, that's messed up that they took the comic book, the novel and the video game, and just jacked their title, because the character in The Force Unleashed is awesome, and that's why I like it. He's a little protege of Darth Vader, you know, and they really only show Darth Vader in these stories as being an older dude, and he's really just walking around with a cape. He's not really getting busy. He's really just menacing, you know. But in this one, Starkiller, I think that's his name, goes on a full-out rampage, and it's beautiful how they explore his story. It's the same way, and he's a made-up character, but now he may be considered canon, because what happened is they found out that the film's audiences are so thirsty that, you know, they don't want to keep seeing the same story over and over again. And what a better way than to take a story that's already been a hit from a comic book and make it, a novel or even a comic book, and make it into a movie. Same thing with my other comic book that I never even read. You know, it's like I didn't read Walking Dead, but I watched the TV show. My love for it is dropping, but I still watched it. I still watch the TV show every once in a while. You know, I'm not even up on this season. My love is dying because they didn't kill Negan, and I was like, man, ain't no way in the world I'm gonna be living in a post-apocalypse and Negan just on GP, you know, is still allowed to live. So anyway, what's the other one? Preacher. Preacher's going to season 3, and they said that that's going to be the last season. And it's sad because the story in the comic book is so tight that they can't even think of a story to make it good enough to put into the television show. And the television show is good. I don't think it's suffering from poor ratings. It's just that they were so dependent on the comic book story that they haven't even expanded it to something else. I think Hellboy has already gone past the comic book and started introducing original stories, but they still maintain some of the same characters. But yeah, I like, now with Shuri, I don't know what they're doing. I know the end of this first run is kind of leaving from potential connections to the universe that the movie is in, but who knows if it's going to be some of the things added in. I mean, she was such an amazing character, Black Girls Rock, in the movie, you know, that you never know. If she gets a television show, hey, they may use the comic book stuff. Why not? I just think that, you know, my overall feeling with comic books, novels, movies and television, and I'm gonna throw board games in there too, is that, you know, black creators don't fully exploit that. Black Latino creators, we don't fully exploit what the different mediums and how to cross our brands into different mediums. So, I mean, that's just an example. But I would say this to you: there's some really good Star Wars stories in the universe, and if they're all going to become canon, that is amazing. Some of them are not as good as others, but for the most part, I like a lot of them just because I like more Star Wars. And one thing I like about them is that they are not necessarily following the hero story arc of Luke and his family within the Jedi and the Empire. So you're following different characters, and that's the beauty of expanded universes or just novels in general, because even novels themselves, when you follow in a series, sometimes they break off and have different characters take over the series. You get to go back and do flashbacks. You get to expand certain areas in the story that, I don't know, you know, I think film is too confined to commercialism in the sense that they are preoccupied by, is this going to be a hit? Now, don't get me wrong, books want to sell as well, no doubt. But I think sometimes, because there's just more writers than there are filmmakers, books take more risks. They take more experiments. One, what you're going to lose? You know, you can test it out after the book is made, and the book doesn't cost maybe $10,000, $20,000 to make, even the most expensive book. Now, if a writer gets an advance, you know, $180,000, that's still cheaper than, you know, a low budget movie, you know. And once a movie is made, it's really hard to go back and shoot different things. Whereas if you write a book and they put it out there, and the proofreaders and the pre-readers, the beta readers and all that come back and say, oh, that's a little weak, it's trash, you could actually rewrite that and add make changes at a lower cost than if you were to reshoot a movie. You know, many times if a movie is trash, they just trash it, and they don't release it. They accept it as a bad movie or bad project, wasted project, and nobody ever sees it. But with books, you don't have that problem. So that's kind of why I like books. But I also like them connected to film and television, because so many times, I guess probably with black characters, you want to see their backstory. You would like to see more elements. They had 3-book series in Star Wars on Lando, you know, and that was really cool. I always wanted to write, not a Lando, I wanted to write Mace Windu story. Now, they don't really have one Mace Windu book, but golly, you know, Samuel Jackson isn't going to be young enough to play a young Mace. But we want to see that story. Mace is an incredible character. I mean, they have some backstories or just stories that involve Yoda. They had a Chewbacca. You know, so I just think those are so cool. I think it would be really challenging to do them in movies, just because how many movies you going to have of Star Wars out a year, you know? Not that they come out every year, but, you know, one is really what they really build up for. 1 or 2. We had Solo and the second Star Wars last year, and, you know, one stepped on the other one's promotion. So I think that's really challenging. Now, Marvel's been able to do that in terms of releasing multiple movies and similar characters for a while, and I think just because we're so thirsty, you know, that they've been able to do that. But again, I don't know. So anyway, this is just me rambling, talking about, you know, the impact of books on film and how they are used to help the overall brand, you know. So that's really it. Touch base with you later. Thank you. Peace.